I've been to an American IKEA and I have gazed upon their lacks.
Hello and welcome to One Cool Thing, a podcast from indie game studio Die Gute Fabrik, hosted by me, Hannah Nicklin. If you're bopping along to the music right now like I am, this is what I do every time I introduce. I listen to the music and I kind of bob in my chair. I just wanted to give a shout out at the top of the show to Nick Ellis for this super cool theme music. Nick, you can find on Bandcamp as Tenby, tenby.bandcamp.com. Someone I know way back when from the London math rock scene, and asked him to do a little bit of music for the show. We kicked around some ideas and he came up with this super cool kind of good morning TV vibe, which I'm really into. So I just wanted to say thanks again to Nick, and do listen through to the end of the show. Do get all the lovely credits of the people who are helping us make this thing. What is this thing? Well, One Cool Thing is a podcast speaking with people in and around video games about one cool thing not from games, which is really fascinating them right now. So I'll introduce them and their practice, and then we'll talk about the one cool thing they've brought to the conversation and consider how it's shaping how they think about their work. It's a chance to hear more about the practices of cool folks working in games, and hopefully somewhere where we can all reflect on how we think about how we make things. So, without further ado, let me introduce our next guest. Okay, so I am super stoked to welcome British game designer V Buckenham to the podcast. I've known V for 15 years. I'm going to give you right to reply right now. How long have I known you?
But I don't know. I don't know time. That sounds about right. Yeah.
A long time. Our paths, I think, crossed in the center of that sort of Venn diagram of performance and games in the London pervasive games and media scene in the late 2000s, I'm going to say. I was coming from performance, and V, you were coming from games, and we were both sort of excitable, fast-talking, easily amused thinkers, and just sort of struck up an affinity there, I think. And since then, V, you've done a lot of things. You're an artist, a curator, a game designer, and that space between games and tech and art, which is sometimes called creative technologist. You long ago did a foundational programming work on Die Gute Fabrik's Mutazione. So technically you're a friend of the company, you're a collaborator, although that was before I worked with them. And I do believe that you got me the job working on Mutazione all that time ago.
The thing I like to say is that I worked on Mutazione for 2 years. And then the thing that actually had the most impact was sending an email saying, yeah, you should hire Hannah. She's a pretty good writer.
So you've also worked on tech-enabled physical games like Beast of Balance, for Niantic, on things I'm fairly sure we're legally not allowed to talk about. And you've also done a lot of curation. You've created gatherings around games for things like World Rumpus and Now Play This. And you recently started working full-time on your own project, Downpour, which is a game-making tool for phones, which I'm super excited about for all the barriers it's going to break down in who gets to make games. And then finally, you also once made a game about punching custard.
I did, yes. All of those things are true.
This is your right to reply section. Do you have anything you want to dispute? Oh, and I should say that you use they them pronouns, because I was using you when I did all that talking. So V they them.
Oh, thank you. Do all of those things. I guess I'm also calling myself an artist these days. I'm aware of this because I just recorded a podcast yesterday after years of not recording any podcasts to come along at once.
Professional podcast guest, V Buckenham.
Book me, call my agent. Yeah. Anyway, and then I was talking about a lot there about when you feel like you're able to call yourself an artist, and that I was had made art for many years before I was oh, actually I guess I'm an artist, not just a game maker, bot maker, all these other things.
I think I spent a long time knowing I was an artist, but trying to come up with a word that made more sense to people, because I think when you work in devising theatre, you tend to call yourself a theatre artist, just makes more sense, because as a devising theatre maker, you're not a playwright or an actor or a director. You're a group of people making theatre in the same way as a band sort of jams together to make music. And then context, you'd say, oh, I'm an artist who works in theatre, and everyone would just imagine painting, essentially. So I spent a long time finding ways to not call myself an artist, so that's fun. I'm glad that we've gotten to a place in the middle again from two different directions. So, V, thank you so much for coming on One Cool Thing. Let's kick off by finding out what the one cool thing you've brought for us to chat about today is.
Now I'm annoyed because I literally have a thing to show, which you wouldn't be able to see, listeners at home. But we'd get to have the anyway. Yeah, I've been doing a pottery course, and I have been making. I brought home today a bowl and a little dish. I'm not sure exactly what you use a little dish for, but I had a bit of clay and it was that size, so I made that. And I've been really getting into it, and definitely like the kind of like you do a course and you're halfway through and you're like, oh yes, definitely I'm going to book on this course next, and I'm like looking up where the nearby studio spaces are so I can like get into this, and so on and so forth.
So are you in a place where you're calling it pottery, or should we say ceramics is what you've brought in?
I do not feel like I am clued up enough into the community to know the weighted meaning that these two different terms has.
This is where I admit that I dated a ceramicist once, and that he certainly had opinions and preferred being called a ceramicist rather than a potter. It might be the comic, but I never quite. It was a long time ago. It might be like comic books and graphic novels. Sometimes people think there's a difference, and sometimes people just want a word that feels more like proper. Ceramicist, graphic novel, I don't know.
I guess the reason I would say pottery, and this obviously gets into a load of stuff I'm sure we're gonna dive more into later, is I quite like that it is less fancy. It feels less like my practice and more like a fun thing I'm doing, and it is more like I'm making some useful things that I can eat my dinner off, rather than a work of art, and it manages to take it out of that realm. But I reserve the right to get really serious about it and then call myself a ceramicist later.
Well, also there's a whole movement, isn't there, which is about reclaiming craft as like, air quotes, like serious practice, because a whole kind of craft has tended to be in the realm of women over history, and devalued as like just a utility. So dressmaking is only like proper when it's in the hand of tailors, and sewing only when it's in the hands of well, I guess I'm going with tailors again. So I think that there's definitely things for us to reclaim about amateurism on the one hand, and also craft and utility as not being anti-artistic. Also, the tiny dishes, whenever I buy ceramics, and I suppose another thing is that I'm actually just a really big fan of things made of clay. I have a really big, weird, like independent ceramics collection, because I decided one day that I didn't need many plates right now. And if I just had one plate that was beautiful, that would be a cool thing, right? And steadily, as I've been in different countries, I've bought pieces from different ceramicists, and now I have a fairly cool kind of I tend towards stoneware, I have to say. Like something about stoneware feels, I don't know, me, like home to me as a thing. But let's turn it back towards you. Can you tell me a bit more about why you chose sort of ceramics or pottery, or should I just say clay? I don't know now.
I don't think it matters what you say.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're okay with that. So
yeah.
Don't at us.
I think actually it came from Anna, my friend who I used to work with at Niantic and Sensible Objects before that, kept saying, oh yeah, I really want to do a pottery course, and even like pitched some ideas internally that were like, oh yeah, look, we could make this game that involves making pottery or doing this kind of stuff. And so maybe it was actually from her being really excited by it and then not managing to find a space on a course and actually do it, kind of put the idea in my head. um yeah, I think it's like, there it is. I think it can be very useful to have a thing that you are doing that is creative, is interesting, but also you're not good at and isn't really part of your practice and isn't something that counts as work. Like, I kind of joked about this with the ceramicist thing earlier, but like, of course, then you then go like, oh well, I really enjoy this, so why don't I like make this work? um
60th career pivot in V Buckingham's.
yeah, exactly. No, but so it's definitely like trying to find something like that and trying to find, hey, here is a interesting thing to do that is not on a computer, that you go and do with your hands, and you can focus in on a thing and think about the thing your hands are touching and do that, where it's not online and kind of abstracted. And
Mm.
yeah, gets you out of the
So
house.
it gets you out of the house as well. Yeah. Imagine leaving the house. I don't know. So this is quite a recent thing for you, super recent, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
like matter of what, weeks, months?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I literally just did the sixth like lesson in this 10 lesson course. So it's very much that like first flush of enthusiasm of like, this is really cool. Like the thing I did not bring to show on the invisible webcam is like the first plate, the first bowl that I brought home from it. Like obviously you like made it the first week and then actually glazed it a few times later and waited for it to dry out, for it to go in the kiln, for it to go in the kiln a second time, and then finally bring it home. So yeah, like it's very much that kind of like, I've just started doing something and it's very exciting. And uh I was very prepared when I went on this course for I was very prepared to go on it and to make a load of really ugly things. And that would be fine. Like I was totally fine with making a load of ugly things. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna make some ugly things. I'll like learn how to do stuff. I will enjoy the process, and I'll bring home some stuff, and maybe it will be bad in a way where I think it's funny to give it to people, and then they're obligated to keep it, even though it's actually bad.
I would do
Um,
that. If you did that to me, I would keep it forever.
yeah,
I have
exactly.
birthday cards that are as old as I am, I'm sure.
But no, actually, it turns out that even the first thing I made, I'm like, oh, actually, this is fine. If someone gave this as a gift to me, I'd be like, oh, this is nice. I enjoy this, or I could imagine spending money on this. Yeah. So,
And I wonder if you could, because it will be super fresh in your memory, I wonder if you can take us through like the first session. Like, how did that feel as someone who is, I think, objectively a extremely accomplished professional in other creative spheres? How did it feel sitting down in the first session?
mm, it felt good. Like I think there's like, especially in that kind of first session, there's like a certain like fear of touching the material. And like, you're working with it, but you're doing it like it was like just roll some stuff out in a sheet, push it into a kind of form to form the kind of bowl shape, like cut it off around there, and then apply slip. So we'd like cut out little bits of paper, stuck them to it, and then applied slip, which is basically like
Really diluted clay.
really really diluted clay with some color in it,
Yeah.
in order to get the pattern on it. And that was, I think, pretty much it. um oh yeah, and then made the other extra bits because it's like, oh yeah, you've got some clay that you cut off, so you've got some spare bits of clay, might as well do something with it. But like the thing of like, you can't just kind of go, here's some clay I've like cut off or discarded or whatever, let me just use this again. You can't just do that. Like there's a whole process of like wedging it in order to get the air out, in order to get it like reclaiming it. So it is actually, you've got this clay, and if you do the wrong thing with it, then actually you can't really use it. It needs to go through a whole process, and you need to go get some fresh clay and kind of work with that. And rolling it out, and like, oh yeah, yeah, don't like accidentally roll it a little bit too thin somewhere, or else that will come through. Or like, it's interesting, the bowl that I've got having the texture from the cloth that it was rolled out on, still kind of going through there.
Do you
um
feel like a game designer when you sit down? or a programmer, or do you feel
Mm,
like a different person, a different bee?
mm, I don't I don't feel like a programmer or a game designer. I think the interesting thing that kind of has carried through is like a lot of the kind of, I guess, like generative art and kind of like very visual art kind of designer kind of brain. Um, like applying that. And there's a certain amount of like in the class, there's a certain amount of like fear I have because it's also like there's two girls there who are also both illustrators. And so it's like, oh, the classic thing of like, I'm around people who are good at drawing, doing something where they are doing some drawing, and I'm also partaking, and I feel a little bit bad because I'm not actually that good at drawing, but I'm still trying to make something visually interesting in that. Um, but still, like going like, oh, actually, I do have a sense of like shape and form and thoughts about color, and like that kind of thing is engaging, and like a sense of like, it's this kind of shape, what would actually work well. Let me stop doing anything now, or else I'll put too many complications in and then it'll look a bit rubbish.
Mm. Because I think my instinct would be to sit down and feel like a baker. I think that
Mm,
all of my instincts would be driven by, like, because you were saying you can't just use the offcuts to immediately make something right. Whereas as a baker, you got some offcuts. I don't know, you're making um all of the things I can think of making now are very much unintelligible to an international audience. I'm thinking of like mince pies and like if you know sausage rolls. There you go. They're pretty. You know, everyone has those. I think Americans don't have those, do they? They have corn dogs.
uh,
They put their sausages in. And in any case, Google sausage roll if you are unfamiliar with the concept. But let's say you're making some sausage rolls with the pastry and there's some left over. You'd maybe put something else in it, make a pasty or whatever your culture might refer to pastry containing kind of food stuffs. Um, it's interesting. I think I would also be pretty competitive. I don't know what kind of learner are you? Are you a competitive learner?
uh, I'm definitely not as competitive as you.
Thanks, B. Hi, world.
No, I'm generally not that competitive, generally fairly, I don't know, like like curiosity driven, or like there still is definitely a kind of like you definitely look at the things other people make and then think about the set of criteria by which yours are fine
Mm.
compared to this. Which doesn't mean they're necessarily like better for everyone, but you just look at them and go, yeah, no, but I wouldn't make that for these reasons, so I'm happy, you know?
So you brought this to us in a context of like I'm asking what's sort of influencing your game
Mm.
design thinking right now, and so we've learned a little bit about your journey into pottery, and I just wonder if we guide the conversation now towards how it's making you maybe think differently about game design or development or any of your practice really.
I think the main way is actually just in this kind of like thinking about shape and color and form and kind of exercising that part of the brain. Like I guess that's part of the like going back to the kind of right reply of like, no, actually I'm also an artist. So like there is like a like part of that is like producing things that are, yes, this is an image on a piece of paper. Like it is image, it is like kind of even static images, like yeah. So I guess it's like exercising that part of the brain and thinking about like yeah, like form and shape and color, and yeah, exercising and developing that kind of side. um I'd also say, and you might relate to this, as a game designer I feel very uh I don't I don't often think that I can kind of point at something and say, yes, yes, I'm inspired by this. Uh, I'm much more kind of like, no, I have a brief and I'm going to try to solve the brief.
Yeah, and if I don't have a brief, I have to draw my brief up in order to be creative, which is,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know, a
Then you have
part
the
of if you've developed your practice by being like someone who consults and does freelance work, like that's just how you learn to make, in my experience.
yeah, exactly. And then yeah, if you don't have a brief, then your brief is, well, find something, like develop a brief that you would like to make that would lead to something good. yeah, so I guess yeah, I don't have that sense of inspiration, and in any case, I'm also in that, like, elbows deep into a project which is creative in itself, but it's the kind of creative where I made some big decisions a few years ago, frankly, and now I'm kind of executing on them. And actually, most of the process um, is fairly boring. It's like, I figured out a way that I can do a whole pile of really boring, mundane work, so that lots of other people won't have to do that same work, and they'll make some really cool stuff.
So we're talking here about Downpour,
Yeah.
um, which you have officially announced, so we're allowed to talk about it. Which is a means for making games on a mobile phone. I guess being in a complete beginner mindset right now is pretty useful for
Mm.
designing something which you hope is going to be used by complete beginners, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Like, I think there's definitely the yeah, it's so weird designing an interface and going, yeah, should be really approachable. Yeah, this should be really easy to understand and do something with and not be scary to approach, but also have interesting corners and interesting wrinkles to it. Um, yeah, obviously it's like a really difficult thing to judge yourself. Um,
So sure, right? Because you have all of these ingrained instincts about how tools for making games work or how making games works, which not only might someone else not have if they're new to it, but are those good in like things to have ingrained in you? Like I'm someone who's really interested, and I think you probably are too, in the poetics of tools.
mm,
Like what and poetics meaning meaning making. Like what other what poetic space does this tool open? Like what's the difference between using ink and twine, for example, to write for a game, right? And what's the difference between using Unreal, Unity, or making your own tool? And like what is built into those systems that shapes the way that you make? These things are like a part of how we make, and something that you have that's sort of quite I would find it exciting from the outside, but I expect on the inside you're just really tired and having to deal with networking problem number 53 right now.
I mean, it still is kind of, yeah, no, it's still exciting. I mean, maybe what I mean by exciting is that I've spent an inordinate amount of time choosing the fonts that people will be able to use, which is also this kind of really concrete thing of like, yeah, there's maybe like going to be ways to hack in some extra font, but no, but very few people are going to do that. Most people are going to use the set of fonts provided, and you don't want to just have like, here's 2000 fonts, because that's a slightly overwhelming choice. So no, here's the small set of fonts, and then the fonts I'm choosing are going to be the kind of visual language or the markers that people will recognize in a game made in Downpour. And that's kind of an overwhelming decision to be trying to make, because you can't just hold in your head all the ways that that could possibly work and exactly how that stuff is going to work. You've kind of just got to go, yeah, this seems like a good selection, makes sense to me, put them in there, see how it feels.
Mm.
Can change my mind a bit later.
I think there's another connection here to clay actually for me because the one of my favorite words is affordances. Tom Armitage's article I quote very often that I've completely forgotten the name of, but it will be in the liner notes. Every time I forget the name of something, I'm assuring listeners it's going in the liner notes. But he uses this term affordances of technology. And when I'm sort of teaching, I use it to like the grain of a piece of wood or the
mm,
qualities of a piece of clay. Like you can work with or against the affordances of your medium, but the important thing is to do so thoughtfully. And what you're doing in designing a tool for making rather than making a thing is designing not only a poetic space, but the affordances of the material people are going to be working in.
yeah, totally. No, and like, that's the kind of thing. Actually, I guess I've got a better example from Epicycles, which was a artwork slash tool I put out last year. You can basically make these kind of like spirograph type patterns. Um, there'll be a link in the liner notes.
There will be. I'm writing it down now.
um, but yeah, so like in that, for example, there's a slider at the bottom where you can control the number of loops a particular set of epicycles in the pattern does, and you can drag the slider across, and that changes the number, or you can change the number. And if you try dragging it, it's like naturally locked to only do whole numbers and to only do whole positive numbers. But actually, you can type into the box and you can put a negative number in there, or you can put a fractional number in there. And when I'm playing around with it, I do this a reasonable amount because I think there's fun stuff you can get from that. But there's almost
it's a very
something
playful piece of design.
yeah. There's something very fun about being like, yeah, you can break out the system. Like a certain type of person is going to go, yeah, but what happens if I put a negative number in here, and giving them the little reward of like, yeah, it goes backwards, yeah. Uh,
I think there's something also really interesting about tools for making, which really like proudly announce that the things made in them were made in them. Like a lot of using a Unity or Unreal, for example, is kind of about vanishing the engine and using it to really, make the thing with the identity. But this makes me think of Sock Pop. What was their image editor called? Do you remember?
Sock Worlds or Sock Stories?
Sock Stories, possibly, but in any case, in the liner notes, as soon as we can, you'll be able to read it in the liner notes. But yeah, I think particularly, we're talking about fonts, like Sock Pop have their own font. They have a visual style which, was inherent in any image that you edited in this like phone-based image editor, which was just meant for like, playfully editing things as opposed to making them look like a beautiful work of editing. And I think there's something quite cool about like as soon as Downpour is sort of up and available, that things might feel like they've been made in Downpour, the same as things feel like they've been made in is it Bitsy? Do I mean Bitsy?
Yeah.
I'm making beautiful movements here that the listeners can't see.
That's the pixel movement.
Which is a pixel moving with my little hand. Like is that something that you're interested in? Like a thing feeling like it's made in Downpour?
I think actually less so. Like there is going to be a certain aesthetic and a certain grain and a certain type of thing, and I'm aware of that, and I'm not like afraid of that, I guess. But at the same time, I think compared to those things, it's much more the expressiveness, or I guess something. It's something where you can bring your own aesthetic and you can shape that. And I guess a lot of the degrees of freedom are in the image and the like visual culture of it. The actual like interactivity is, at least in the first release, going to be fairly limited. It's kind of choose your own adventure hypertext kind of thing, which is, you can do lots of interesting things with. I'm sure people are going to do stuff that'll surprise me. That's kind of
you have a thread, V, on Twitter which you add to every now and then, which is people find their own uses for things or something, right?
Yeah, find their own uses for tools, yeah.
Yes, and it's just people doing wonderful imaginative things with stuff absolutely not intended for that. I don't have any good examples in my head. Do you remember what your most recent one was?
I don't remember what the most recent one was, but the one I most enjoy was just like the RSPCA or someone carrying a swan in an IKEA bag.
Brilliant. Does America have IKEA? Is that going to be another one?
They have IKEA, yeah.
Okay, great. Not that our only audiences are in America. I hope that they're all over the world, and I just don't have time to ask if every country has IKEA.
I have been to
asking about America now.
I've been to an American IKEA, and I have gazed upon their lacks.
Great. Lacks, for those of you not familiar with IKEA, is a kind of furniture. It's a piece of furniture. Okay. It also means licorice in Danish, and they love to put licorice in all the things that should not have licorice in them. Downpour. I understand where it's at and what it wants to do, but did you always know that's what Downpour needed to do? It was going to be a game tool for people. Like, when did the idea come to you, and what made you essentially quit your job in order to pursue it?
I think it was a good while ago. I mean, I think the basic thing of as somebody who's interested, as somebody who's both a game designer and interested in making creative tools, the idea of making a game engine that is easy for people to use is, I think, like a kind of obvious space for me to be thinking about.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think I was like turning it over and kind of the um I guess a bunch of it is just the kind of like, oh, but it shouldn't be this annoying. Like it should exist. I think part of this was at Now Play This, and we showed flat game stuff, and it was kind of like, flat games. It's like, yeah, just draw some stuff on a piece of paper.
Let's just define Now Play This and flat games.
Oh yeah. So Now Play This is a yearly festival of games and play that happens at Somerset House in London every April,
Mhm.
including this April. It'll be good. I am less involved than I once was.
It is very
But
good. I endorse it. And then flat games in particular.
so yeah, like flat games, it's I guess this like type of, what's it called, like I guess artistic movement, or like someone said, yeah, why don't we make flat games which are
It was a
limited in a particular
manifesto.
way.
At
A
some point, there was a
manifesto, yeah, there
manifesto,
we go.
and yeah,
Yeah, of just
that was
like,
a thing.
we like assets that are drawn on pieces of paper and no collision and kind of narrative games. And there were some jams and some interesting things got made. And whilst I was involved in curating Now Play This, we had a flat games workshop, because it's great, people can come to an exhibition and also make a thing. And that's a big part of, like, anyone can make a thing. This culture is open to you. Also, it just feels nice if you visit an exhibition and get to go away going like, this thing I did, not just a thing I saw. So we had this exhibition, but it was just this kind of like slightly thing of like, when you try to make it, you can draw on a piece of paper and you can scan it in, and then there's like this really annoying period where you're like, I've got a JPEG of a photograph I've taken of an image, and now I need to like cut it out and like isolate it and then export it into Unity. And now I need to like use the Unity interface to make this work. And like, I guess basically it's just the kind of programmer part of my brain that saw that and was like, you could automate this. This could be more efficient. But then it's like, if you do make this more efficient, if you do make this more accessible, like there's no like technical reason that this has to be annoying and painful to do. And if you did do that, then suddenly you'd have like, you suddenly this kind of form, this kind of interesting style of games would be available to whole just many more people. And so then once you have that, it's like, well, it should be on a phone, really, because computers do have cameras, but not ones that are useful to point at things. Phones definitely have cameras that are good to point at things. People do that all the time. So, okay, you put it on a phone, and that's also good because there's a whole load of people who maybe have a laptop or have access to a computer, but don't really use it that much, or it's just really for schoolwork, or maybe they don't even have a laptop at all. And there's not that many good solutions for those people to make games. And then, okay, but what's the like easiest format that the game can take? What's the like thing that really simplifies it and that also makes sense to play on a phone? Because
Mm.
I still think that virtual joysticks suck, and I'm continue to be surprised that there are so many millions of people playing games with virtual joysticks on their phones.
Like really like complex, like quick multiplayer online games as
Yeah.
well. The kids sure know how to use them boomers can virtual joystick. Will be extinguished soon. Um, I'm aware, however, that I sort of went from beginner mindset, how you're approaching pottery, into the sort of beginners that you're trying to sort of build something
Mm.
within Downpour. But I wonder if I've done your topic a little bit of disservice there, because I've immediately connected it to your work. And maybe I've neglected to just sort of listen to the very beginning of your sentiment, which is that this is a rest from work. This is me not working. And that's as much a part of you, that has to be a part of your practice, right?
Yeah. Or I mean, I think even more than that, like, I don't know, like it's the term practice I always think is interesting, of like, like what counts as what counts as practice, or it's the same as like what counts as work, what counts, what's within the circle and what's outside of it. And I think, and it's also like I guess to be inclusive for people who would not consider themselves to have a practice or would not consider them to have this. And it's not like being creative or making interesting choices or being engaged is excluded from that. So it's, I guess, part of that. um yeah, it's just it's nice to make things. It's nice to learn new things. It's nice to, yeah, feel yourself getting better at something. It's nice to eat your dinner off a nice plate that has a nice pattern. And it's also nice to like learn something and then suddenly like have this new like layer on the world. I've been like going around like looking at, you know things made of clay and just kind of like having the kind of thought of like, oh yes, that's how I would join that thing to that thing. Or, oh yes, I can see that glaze is interesting, or whatever. Like you suddenly
Mm.
just got this new kind of lens to look at things, and this new like, here is a thing that was previously an object and now it has more context for me. And I guess actually the other thing to also kind of undo that insistence that these two things are separate and that actually no,
I
this is a
believe I
place away
was
from work.
insisting. I think I offered you
No, no, no. I was insisting. I was
Okay.
insisting the no, this is not work. I guess actually the other thing is like just the joy of making something that's useful.
Mm.
Like like hopefully Downpour is useful to people. Um and similarly it's like, yeah, I'm making a mug, just a useful object for people to have, and kind of insisting on, no, actually the usefulness is important, not just the like the creativity or the expressiveness or the this is special
Mm.
thing of it. Instead
A
it's
thing
like,
that
no,
has thingness, a thing that has purpose.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
I've
yeah,
been rereading Benjamin and the work of art and the age of mechanical reproduction, which yeah, just in the context of all of the discourse around AI and what is and isn't art if it was made with the hand of the invisible hand of an AI, I suppose. But in between sort of Benjamin and all of the sort of discussion about, okay, what is stuff when you can reproduce it, and make it identical to the thing before it, that discourse is all sort of tries to ask like what gives a cup its cupness. Is it the fact it's used as a cup, or is it the fact it's shaped as a cup? I guess I don't want to drag us into phenomenology,
yeah.
um, but there is something quite special, yeah, about making a thing that has thingness.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And just the yeah, I don't know, the insistent, like not insisting that this is special, this is one of a kind, this is the like a thing doesn't have to be the best thing in the like the pottery I'm making is not the best pottery in the world. It's very far from that, but it's still good and it's still useful and it's still, I mean, appreciated by me. I'm sure as I make more things, hopefully appreciated by more people.
I'm impatient for my gift that I'll keep forever now.
Okay, great.
Um,
Yeah.
I mean, my birthday's in October. You've got some time to do some experimentation. Um, is there anything that you sort of came to the podcast sort of feeling like you wanted to say about pottery, or that you wanted to offer to folks?
um I don't think that there's anything kind of lingering there except for, the inevitable plug of, yes, you can sign up and find out when Downpour is coming out, and you can go on my website and see various art tool things on that spectrum.
You've anticipated my next question, which is, do you have anything to promote? Do you have any socials that we should follow you on? Um, where V can people find you? What search terms should they use? What names?
If you search for V Buckenham, or if you look up V21, I'm V21 as the three characters. On Twitter, I'm V21 as a letter and then two words. On Instagram, I'm v21.io, which I feel bad about actually. As it's Indian Ocean, and there's a whole colonial backstory to the domain.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I learned that. Okay. You should feel bad.
Yeah. I should really get around to changing that to something else. But for now, that is my complicit website that you can visit.
And so we've chatted about Downpour. Do you have a sort of a release date for it, or a kind of sign up and test it?
So yeah, there's a mailing list. I'm starting now actually to start sending out like alpha builds to people I know to kind of test it. We'll be expanding that out further. In terms of release date, I for the second time pushed the change that updates the date on my website just this morning to no longer say early 2023 and instead say summer 2023.
Summer. I mean, just cut your losses and put autumn in there. That's like I'm trying to release a video game this year, and like that's my advice is don't tell anyone. Just put a year in, and then
if I write autumn, it'll be next year. So
that's you've got to keep the pressure on yourself in some ways. I understand. And finally, is there anywhere the listeners can go to view some of your early experiments in pottery?
It's not there currently, but through the magic of it taking a while for things to be up there, I think there'll definitely be some on my Instagram.
All right, so head to V's Instagram if you want to see some of those early experiments.
I'm just waiting for a day which has good sunshine so I can do those, like proper Instagram shots.
Yeah, that's what you need. All right, well, V, it's been an absolute delight to speak to you, and I'm sure that everyone has enjoyed hearing some of your thoughts on pottery, on Downpour, on tools, on how we make things. And thank you so much for the time that you spent with us today.
Thank you so much. This has been really fun.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of One Cool Thing from Die Gute Fabrik. As ever, leave a rating or review wherever you can. If this chat was of value to you, then that's a great way to say thank you. And then thanks also to Nick Ellis for the music and Tom Wally for production on these podcasts. They're going out much quicker than they otherwise would have done because Tom is editing them. I'll be back soon with a new episode speaking with another cool thinker and maker in the field of video games. And in the meantime, check out Die Gute Fabrik on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. That's GUTEFABRIK. Stay thoughtful, friends. Take care and goodbye.